Okay, after I posted this previous video on how to create a tic-tac-toe app using C#.net and Winforms, I got a request to add two additional features to the application. The first one being the ability to represent whose turn it is without having to click on a button. That is, to either have a label that says it's X's turn or O's turn or some other feature or mechanism that would let the user know when they click on a button whether X or O is going to show up. The other feature that was requested is an indication of how many times X has won, how many times O has won, and how many times there has been a draw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tackle both of these features in this video, and hopefully they'll help you guys do this as well if you want to take a shot at it. So I don't have a lot of screen real estate here to work with in terms of adding a label or some indicator that says whose turn it is. So what I thought we would do is basically create a couple additional event handlers that when you moused over the button would tell you whose turn it is. And then we'll show if it's X's turn, it would show an X. If it's O's turn, they would show an X or excuse me, an O. And when they rolled off of the button, then it would return back to its normal state, right? So let's jump right in and let's get this knocked out. So I'm going to go ahead and select a button, um, and I'm going to create two new event handlers. Um, uh, so along with buttons, there's an event called mouse enter. Now this gets fired anytime the mouse actually enters the control. Um, Obviously, there's also a mouse leave event that will fire anytime the mouse leaves a control or the button. So what I'm going to call this, I'm going to create two methods. One's called button enter. We'll add him, and then I'm also going to do a button leave. Okay. So you'll see again, Visual Studio creates these methods for us, the frames of them. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and the kind of boring part, you guys do the same, is I'm gonna apply the same event to all 9 buttons. Okay, so for mouse enter, we're going to have button enter as our event handler method. So let me copy and paste here. Okay, and then we also want to add a button leave event for the mouse leave. Copy and paste, right? Okay, so let's think about how we need to use these methods now. What we're saying is if when the user mouses over this button, if it's X's turn, I want an X to be showed on the button. If it's O's turn, I want an O to be showed on the button. If the button is disabled, that means somebody's already clicked it, so I don't need to update that label because no one can click on it. So let's go back here and look at our button enter method. And the first thing we're going to do is create a reference to the button itself, right? Just like we did um, in the last video. Oops. Okay. And now what we want to say is we want to say if it's turn, and if you recall, turn is a Boolean variable that we toggle every time someone takes a turn. If turn is true, then it's X's turn. If turn is false, then it's Y's turn. So if turn, I want to say b.text equals X. And uh, let's see, we don't probably need the brackets for now. We can just say else. We want to say b.text equals O, right? Now if we run this, oops, it's not sender, or B, it's sender. There we go. If we run this, what should happen is when we mouse over a button, it should change the label to say either X or O according to whose turn it is. So let's run it, and you'll see that says X. If we mouse into another button, that'll also say X. This doesn't change back, right, because we haven't added anything to our button leave event handler. But if I actually click on this, X gets disabled, um, and you'll see here, this seems to be working well, right? O wins because we moused over everything. Let's add a little bit of logic around this that just says if B is enabled, just to make sure we're not changing something if someone's already selected that button. That seemed to work okay the way we just did it, but let's add that just in case. We also need to handle our button leave event, right? So if the button is enabled and the mouse leaves the event, then we simply want to say b.text. I guess it might help if I create a reference to that button. So create a reference to the button that was left essentially, and I'm going to say b.text equals an empty label, right? Because we just want to set that status back to the way that it was. So if we try and run this now, we should see X, and you'll notice when we leave the mouse or we leave the button, it reverts back to an empty label. If we click on it, we can't change it if we mouse over it again or leave it or whatever. So you'll see that this works like a champ, right? Draw, no problem. Okay, so that's kind of step one, right? So one of the features was we wanted to be able to say whose turn it is when we, without having to click on the button to find out, right? So we've accomplished that. Now the next thing was we want to keep track of how many times each player has won, how many times X has won, how many times O has won, and how many times there's been a draw. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the Winform a little bit bigger, and I'm going to add some labels. Now, if you look at your toolbox over here, you should also have some labels, and I'm going to just create sort of some titles here. So I'm going to say X win count. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it bold, and I'm going to underline it. Okay? And then I'm going to copy and paste this 2 more times. So this will be the draw count, and this will be the O win count. All right. So let's space these evenly, and then let's make sure we feel like they're aligned. All right. I'm going to move them down just a hair. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop another label underneath each one of these. And I'm going to initialize the text in the label to 0, right? Because this is going to be our counter. So 0, let's put him under here, and we can put him under here, right? And let's evenly space these guys, and now we're nice and centered, right? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rename these because label 4 is just not that intuitive. So I'm going to call this X win count. I'm going to call this draw count. And I'll call this one O win count. Okay. Now what we need to do is anytime there's a winner for X or O, or anytime there's a draw, we need to increment the values that are in these labels, right? So let's go back into our code, and if you recall from the previous video, we have a method that basically checks to see if there's a winner. If there is a winner, we figure out who's the winner, and then we show who won, right? So let's add a little bit of logic inside here that says that we should increment the value in that text or that label, right? So we have O win count. Now these are all strings, even though we have a 0 there. These are all string values. So before we can do any addition to them, we need to convert them to numbers, right? So what we're going to say is O win count.text equals int 32 dot parse. We want to parse the value that's already there, and starting out it will be 0, obviously. But whatever's there, and then we want to increment it by 1. And the reason this is still yelling at us is this is going to give us a number, right? This is going to be an integer. We can't store integers in a text property. So we can use the almighty toString function to handle that for us. And now we should be set. So I'm going to add the same logic here for x, except for when we do this, we need to be dealing with the x win count to increment it. And lastly, if there's a draw, we know there's been a draw because there has not been a winner and the turn count is equal to 9. So we'll change, make this addition that says draw count, and we'll increment that, right? Now what we should see is whenever we have a winner, x gets incremented, right? If we do a new game, that doesn't work right now. I'm going to show you why that doesn't work in a second. Um, I guess I'll show it to you right now, actually. So let's go back up here where we have our new game event handler. Oops, getting a little click happy here. Let's look at this event handler. Basically, what's going on here is now that we've added some other components to our form, namely these labels, um, when these labels try to get converted to a button, we're throwing an exception, right? So what we really need to do is we need to move our try catch inside of our for each control. And what that will do is, excuse me, um, if we do try to convert a label to a button, it will fail, but it will continue trying to do the rest of the controls on the screen. If we left it on the outside, if it failed one time, whichever control it failed at, it would basically drop out of this entire block of code and our method would no longer work, right? So this should solve that problem for us. So let's go back and try this again. We'll do x, o, x, o, x, right? X wins, x gets incremented, or the x count, win count gets incremented. If I go new game now, you'll see that that works as we intended. If we do x, o, x, o, x, o, you'll see that the o win count got incremented. And just for posterity, um, let's get a draw, and you'll see the draw count went increments, right? Okay. Now, the way that this is built, the only way to reset these values, these counter values, is basically to close the application and reopen it. Now, maybe you want to have the ability to reset these values on your own without having to close the application and reopen it. Why don't we add another menu option here that says reset counts, and we'll just give the user that capability directly. So let's call this reset win counts, and let's move him above the exit. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and that's going to create our event handler for a click. Now all we really need to do here is we need to say o win count dot text equals 0, and we need to do that for draw and for x as well, right? And now we have a great mechanism to essentially reset this if we choose to. If we wanted to, reset the entire game, we could make that happen as well. You could fire this event manually, or you could have the exact same logic that we have in the new game event handler aligned with this reset win count as well. All right. So there you have it. Basically, the ability to figure out whose turn it is before they click, and also a mechanism to keep track of who wins and who's lost, who has won and who has lost, and how many draws there's been. So take a shot at it. Good luck. Take care.